Your account is empty. The banker's words didn't register at first. I sat in the sterile office, still foggy from anesthesia, my surgical incision throbbing beneath the loose hospital gown I'd changed into before coming here. My daughter Iris had insisted on driving me straight from the hospital to the bank. She'd said something about needing to verify my accounts were secure after the surgery. I'd thought it was sweet, protective. Now the banker, a young woman with kind eyes, was staring at me with confusion and concern. "What do you mean, empty?" My voice sounded strange, distant. The pain medication was still working through my system. "I mean your primary checking account has a zero balance. Your savings account too. All of it. As of this morning, approximately $347,000 transferred out." The room tilted slightly. I reached for the armrest of the chair. My fingers found cold metal and held on. "That's impossible. I just had surgery 4 hours ago. I was under anesthesia." The banker turned her computer screen toward me. There it was. Transaction after transaction. All from this morning. All to an account I didn't recognize. The timestamps showed 6:47 a.m., 7:12 a.m., 7:38 a.m. I'd been in recovery at that time, still unable to move, still unable to think clearly. "Do you have authorized signers on this account?" the banker asked gently. I nodded slowly. My ex-husband had been removed years ago, but I'd added Iris after he passed. She was my only child. It seemed like the responsible thing to do. Emergency access? Just in case. I need to see the bank records. I need to see exactly where this money went. What I didn't say was that my hands had started to shake. What I didn't say was that my chest felt like something heavy was sitting on it, crushing the air out. What I didn't say was that somewhere in my medication-hazed mind, a terrible clarity was beginning to form. The banker pulled up more details. The receiving account belonged to someone named Cassandra Holdings, LLC. An LLC I'd never heard of. An LLC that shared the same address as the house where my daughter Iris had been living for the past year. "When did this account receive the transfers?" I asked. "This morning, all of it, within the span of an hour." I tried to stand up. My legs weren't quite ready. I sat back down hard. The incision pulled. I winced. "I need to make a report. This is fraud. This is theft." The banker's expression shifted. She was already reaching for forms. "Of course, I'll help you file a report with our fraud department immediately. We'll also need to contact the authorities." But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was moving backward through time. Iris had picked me up from the hospital this morning. She'd been cheerful. Too cheerful. She'd talked about needing to run errands after dropping me off. She'd mentioned something about a business opportunity she was exploring. She'd asked if I had any cash at home because she needed to borrow some money for a deposit. I'd told her no. I'd told her my savings were for my retirement. I'd told her she needed to learn to manage her own finances. That was yesterday, before the surgery, before I'd gone under anesthesia and couldn't protect what was mine. The banker was still talking, explaining procedures and timelines and fraud investigation protocols, but I was already pulling out my phone with shaking fingers. I called Iris. She didn't answer. I called again. Again, nothing. I sent a text. "Where are you? I need to talk to you about my bank account." The response came 3 minutes later. "I'm busy right now. Can we talk later?" I stared at those words. Can we talk later? As if she didn't know. As if she hadn't just stolen nearly $250,000 from me while I was unconscious on an operating table. I called the police. The officer who arrived at the bank was a man named Detective Reeves. He was older, probably in his 60s, with gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen this kind of thing before. He took my statement in a small office at the back of the bank. The banker provided copies of the transactions. We went through them methodically. "Your daughter has authorized access?" he asked, not looking up from the papers. "Yes, but only for emergencies, not for this. Not for taking everything." "Did you have a written agreement about what constituted an emergency?" I shook my head. I felt stupid, naive. I'd trusted my only child with the keys to my financial security, and she'd used them to rob me blind. "I'll need to speak with her," Detective Reeves said. "Do you have a current address?" I gave him Iris's address, the one I'd helped her pay the deposit on, the one I'd furnished with my own money because she'd said she was starting fresh after a bad breakup, the one I'd visited every Sunday for the past year, bringing groceries and homemade meals because she'd claimed she was struggling financially. She'd been struggling financially because she was apparently spending money on something called Cassandra Holdings, LLC. "I'll follow up with her today," Detective Reeves said. "In the meantime, you should contact your employer about taking some time off. This is going to take a while to sort out." I'd already taken time off. 3 weeks for recovery from surgery. 3 weeks that were supposed to be about healing and rest. 3 weeks that had just become about something entirely different. I got home around noon. The house felt different, smaller, less safe. I sat on my couch and stared at the walls I'd painted 5 years ago. The furniture I'd chosen carefully. The life I'd built piece by piece after my divorce, after learning to be alone, after deciding that my independence and my security were the most important things I could cultivate. All of it felt fragile now. My phone rang. It was Iris. "Mom, what is going on? Why did a police detective call me?" I heard the indignation in her voice, the offense, as if she were the victim here, as if I'd done something wrong by reporting the theft of my own money. "You emptied my bank account?" I said flatly. "While I was having surgery." There was a pause, a long one. Then, "I needed the money." Those 5 words. I needed the money, as if that explained everything, as if desperation justified theft, as if our relationship, mother and daughter, meant nothing in the face of her financial needs. "You had no right," I said. "I was going to pay it back." "When? When were you going to pay back $347,000? "I don't know, Mom. I got in over my head with some investments. I thought I could turn it around. I thought I could replace the money before you even noticed." I laughed. It came out bitter, harsh. I noticed immediately. Because I'm awake now, and my account is empty, and you're telling me you were going to steal from me and hope I wouldn't find out. I didn't steal from you. You're my mother. I was borrowing. Borrowing requires permission, Iris. You didn't ask. You just took it while I was unconscious, while I was vulnerable. That's not borrowing. That's theft. I hung up. She called back 4 times. I didn't answer. She left voicemails. I didn't listen to them. I sat on my couch with my hand over my incision and tried to breathe through the pain that wasn't just physical anymore. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and phone calls. The bank froze the account that had received the transfers. Detective Reeves informed me that he was treating it as a civil matter as much as a criminal one, since Iris did have authorized access to my accounts. That distinction felt important to him. It felt meaningless to me. What mattered was that my daughter had taken my money. What mattered was that I'd trusted her, and she'd betrayed that trust in the most calculated way possible, waiting until I was incapacitated, unable to stop her, unable to even know it was happening. I called my lawyer, a woman named Helen Voss, who'd handled my divorce years ago. She listened to the situation and then said something that made my stomach turn. Proving criminal intent will be difficult, Helen said. She has legal access to the account. She could argue she was borrowing. She could argue she intended to repay it. Without a written agreement stating otherwise, this becomes complicated. So she gets away with it? I'm not saying that, but you may need to pursue this as a civil matter. You could sue for the return of the funds. You could also pursue a restraining order preventing her from accessing your accounts. The police will do their investigation, but the criminal charges may not stick. I felt something harden in me. Something that had been soft, maternal, forgiving, hopeful, suddenly calcified into something else. Resolve, anger, a clarity about what I needed to do. Change the account access, I told Helen. Remove her immediately. Already done, Helen said. I called the bank this morning. She no longer has access to any of your accounts. Good. Wera, I want you to know that I understand this is difficult. Family financial disputes are some of the hardest cases I work. I didn't respond. I was thinking about all the times I'd helped Iris, all the times I'd put her needs before my own, all the times I'd believed she was struggling and needed my support. I was thinking about the Sunday dinners I'd brought to her apartment, the money I'd given her for car repairs and medical bills, and just to help out. The emotional labor of being a mother who believed her daughter was trying to do better. And all of it had been a setup. All of it had been her getting close enough to steal from me. I didn't know that for certain, of course, but the feeling was there, creeping through my thoughts like poison. The feeling that I'd been manipulated, that my love had been used. On the 5th day after the surgery, I received a letter from Iris. It was handwritten, on the back of a card with a sunset on the front. Inside, she'd written, "Mom, I'm sorry. I know you're angry. I'm angry too, at myself, at the situation, at everything. I made a terrible mistake. I got involved with some people who promised me returns on an investment. I thought I could make the money back and replace what I took before you even knew it was gone. I know that was stupid. I know that was wrong. But you have to understand. I was desperate. I was scared. And you've always been the one I turn to when I'm scared. So I did the thing I shouldn't have done. I took what I needed because I knew you would eventually forgive me. Because that's what mothers do. I'm asking you to forgive me now. I'm asking you to understand that I'm not a bad person. I just made a bad choice. Please call me. Please let me talk to you about this in person. Love, Iris." I read the letter 3 times. Each time, I felt something different. The first time, I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe she really was sorry. Maybe this was genuine. The second time, I felt anger. She was manipulating me again. She was banking on my maternal instinct to override my better judgment. The third time, I felt nothing. I was numb. I didn't call her. Detective Reeves came by my house on the 7th day. He sat in my living room, and he told me that Iris had admitted to the transfers. She'd claimed it was a loan. She'd claimed she intended to repay it. She'd claimed she was sorry and had made a mistake. "The district attorney has decided not to press charges," Detective Reeves said. "There's not enough evidence of criminal intent. She has legal access to the account. She claims she was borrowing. Without a written agreement stating that she didn't have permission to access the funds, it becomes a civil dispute." I nodded slowly. I'd expected this. Helen had warned me. But hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch. "You can pursue it civilly," Detective Reeves continued. "You can sue for the return of the funds. You can also pursue a restraining order if you feel threatened. But criminally, my hands are tied." After he left, I sat in my living room and made a decision. I was going to fight for my money, not because I thought I'd get it back, I wasn't naive enough to believe that anymore, but because I needed to establish boundaries. I needed to show Iris that there were consequences for betrayal. I needed to protect myself. I called Helen the next morning. "I want to sue," I said. "I want to file a civil suit for the full amount, plus damages. I want a restraining order. I want to make it clear that I will not tolerate this." "Okay," Helen said. She didn't sound surprised. "I'll start the paperwork today. This will take time, though. These things always do. I don't care how long it takes. You also need to prepare yourself for the possibility that she won't have the money to repay you. If she spent it on these investments, and those investments failed, there may be nothing to recover." I'd already thought about that. I'd already accepted it. What I hadn't accepted was the idea of doing nothing, of letting her get away with it, of allowing her to believe that there were no consequences for stealing from her own mother. The lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later. Iris was served with papers at her apartment. According to Helen, she'd called the apartment complex management and claimed that I was harassing her. She'd also, apparently, told her friends that I was being unreasonable and cruel for pursuing legal action against my own daughter. I didn't care what she told people. I cared about establishing the truth. The next 3 months were consumed by the legal process, depositions, discovery, motions. Iris's lawyer, a man named Gregory Vance, who seemed to specialize in making excuses for white-collar criminals, argued that the transfer was a loan, that Iris had intended to repay it, that I was being vindictive and cruel for pursuing charges against my own child. Helen countered with documentation of my account history. She presented evidence that Iris had been living beyond her means. She presented evidence of the investment scheme that had apparently been a scam, designed to take money from people like my daughter. She presented evidence that Iris had been planning this for months, had been positioning herself as the trusted daughter, had been getting close to me specifically to gain access to my finances. That last part wasn't explicitly stated in the legal documents, but it was implied, and it was true. During the discovery process, I learned things about my daughter that I didn't want to know. I learned that she'd been talking to her friends about my money for over a year. I learned that she'd told people I was loaded and too old to enjoy it anyway. I learned that she'd been planning to ask me for a large loan before she'd decided to just take it. I learned that she'd been lying to me consistently and deliberately. The day of the trial, I woke up early. My incision had healed months ago, but I could still feel the phantom pain of it sometimes. I could still remember the feeling of waking up in recovery, still foggy, still vulnerable, and having no idea that my daughter was draining my bank account while I was unconscious. I wore a navy suit to court. I wore my wedding ring, even though I'd been divorced for 15 years. I wore my grandmother's necklace, a small gold chain with a tiny compass pendant. I needed to feel grounded. I needed to feel like myself. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Helen and I sat at one table. Iris and Gregory Vance sat at the other. Iris looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. She had dark circles under her eyes. She wouldn't look at me. The judge was a woman in her 70s named Judge Marianne Cortez. She had steel gray hair and the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen every excuse and every manipulation tactic in the book. Helen presented our case first. She laid out the timeline. She showed the transactions. She presented evidence of the investment scheme and Iris's financial desperation. She presented evidence of Iris's statements to friends about my money. She presented a clear picture of deliberate theft masked as borrowing. Gregory Vance argued that Iris was a young woman who'd made a mistake. He argued that she'd been desperate and scared. He argued that I was being vindictive and cruel for pursuing legal action against my own daughter. He argued that family disputes should be resolved within the family, not in a courtroom. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand and sat down. The court clerk swore me in. Helen asked me to describe my relationship with my daughter. I did. I described the Sunday dinners, the financial help, the trust I'd placed in her, the decision to add her to my bank account for emergencies. And did you ever give her permission to transfer $347,000 from your account? Helen asked. No, I said. I absolutely did not. Did you ever discuss with her what would constitute an emergency that would warrant her using the account? No, I trusted her. I thought she understood the difference between borrowing and stealing. Helen sat down. Gregory Vance stood up. He approached me with a sympathetic expression that made my skin crawl. Ms. Weaver, you love your daughter, don't you? I do. And you've always tried to help her when she was struggling? Yes. And she's had a difficult life, hasn't she? Her father and you divorced when she was young. She struggled financially. She's had relationship problems. Yes, but... So when she says she needed help, you believed her? You wanted to help her. There's a difference between helping and allowing myself to be robbed. Is there? Or is that just what you've decided to believe now that you're angry with her? I felt my hands curl into fists. I forced them to relax. I trusted her with access to my account for emergencies. Taking $347,000 without my knowledge or permission is not an emergency. It's theft. It's theft only if she didn't intend to repay it. And my client has stated that she absolutely intended to repay every penny. She simply got involved in an investment opportunity that didn't work out the way she'd hoped. She stole from me while I was unconscious on an operating table, I said. My voice was steady, cold. That's not a mistake. That's calculated. Judge Cortez intervened. Mr. Vance, I think we've established the basic facts. Ms. Weaver, you can step down. I left the stand and walked back to my seat. I didn't look at Iris. I couldn't. If I looked at her, I was afraid of what I might feel. Anger, sadness, betrayal. All of it mixed together into something I didn't have a name for. The closing arguments took another hour. Helen was brilliant. She laid out the facts methodically. She presented the law. She made it clear that regardless of Iris's intentions or her financial struggles, she had committed theft. She had taken money that wasn't hers without permission. She had violated her mother's trust in the most egregious way possible. Gregory Vance argued for compassion. He argued that Iris was young and scared and had made a mistake. He argued that destroying her future by holding her legally responsible would be cruel and unjust. He argued that I should find it in my heart to forgive her. Judge Cortez took 30 minutes to deliberate. When she returned, she had her decision. In the matter of Weaver versus Iris Weaver, I find in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to repay the full amount of $347,000, plus court costs and legal fees, which brings the total to $412,000. Additionally, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing the defendant from accessing the plaintiff's financial accounts or contacting the plaintiff without the presence of a third party. The gavel came down. It was over. Iris stood up. She looked at me for the first time since we'd arrived at the courthouse. Her eyes were red. Her face was blotchy. She looked devastated. I felt nothing. Helen put her hand on my arm. We won, she said quietly. I nodded, but I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like I'd lost something I could never get back. I'd lost the idea of my daughter as someone I could trust. I'd lost the belief that family bonds meant something. I'd lost the ability to see her without remembering what she'd done. The judge's order didn't mean Iris would pay me back. We both knew that. She didn't have $412,000. She probably didn't have $4,000. The money was gone, spent on an investment scheme that had turned out to be a scam, just like Gregory Vance had suggested. But the order meant something else. It meant that a court of law had found her guilty of theft. It meant that her actions had consequences. It meant that I had stood up for myself and made it clear that betrayal would not be tolerated. I walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sunlight. Helen walked beside me, talking about next steps and enforcement options, and the possibility of garnishing Iris's wages if she ever got a job that paid enough to warrant it. I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about the moment I'd decided to add Iris to my bank account. I was thinking about how different things would be if I'd just said no. If I'd just kept my finances separate. If I'd just protected myself the way I should have all along. But I hadn't. And now I had to live with the consequences of that choice. That night, I sat in my living room and made a list of everything I needed to do. Cancel the joint account. Set up new accounts with different passwords. Check my credit report for any fraud. Change the locks on my house. Not that Iris had a key, but the gesture felt important. Review my will and make sure she wasn't listed as a beneficiary. Hire a financial advisor to help me rebuild what I'd lost. The list was long, it was overwhelming, but it was also necessary. Over the next month, I completed most of the items on my list. I met with a financial advisor named Marcus Chen, who helped me understand where I stood financially. The $347,000 was a significant loss, but it wasn't catastrophic. I still had my retirement accounts. I still had my house. I still had my job. I was going to be okay, but my retirement timeline had just moved back by at least 5 years. I also started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, and she specialized in family trauma. We talked about trust and betrayal and the specific pain of being hurt by someone you love. We talked about my tendency to sacrifice my own needs for my children. We talked about the fact that Iris wasn't really a child anymore, and I didn't have to set myself on fire to keep her warm. "You've spent your entire life being a good mother," Dr. Okonkwo said during one session. "But being a good mother doesn't mean accepting betrayal. It doesn't mean allowing yourself to be manipulated or stolen from. It means loving your child while also protecting yourself." I cried during that session. I cried for the daughter I thought I had. I cried for the relationship I thought we had. I cried for the innocence I'd lost. 3 months after the trial, I received a letter from Iris. It was different from the first one. This one was angry. "Mom, I can't believe you actually went through with the lawsuit. I can't believe you actually took me to court like I'm some kind of criminal. Do you know what this has done to my life? Do you know what it's like to have your own mother turn against you? I made a mistake. Yes. But I was going to fix it. I was going to make it right. And instead, you decided that punishment was more important than forgiveness. I don't expect you to understand. But I'm telling you now, I'm done. I'm done trying to have a relationship with you. I'm done being the bad guy in your story. I'm done. Don't contact me again. I don't want to hear from you." I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't think about it for several days. When I finally did think about it, I realized something. I wasn't hurt by her words. I wasn't devastated by the idea of losing her. I was relieved. I was relieved because I no longer had to try. I no longer had to believe that she would change or grow or eventually understand what she'd done. I no longer had to hold on to hope that our relationship could be repaired. I was free. I called Helen and told her to send a formal letter to Iris's lawyer stating that I was not to be contacted by Iris or anyone on her behalf. I changed my phone number. I changed my email address. I made it clear that this chapter of my life was closed. 6 months after the surgery, I was in a completely different place. I'd returned to work. I'd started exercising again, carefully, making sure my incision had fully healed. I'd taken up painting, something I hadn't done since college. I'd reconnected with friends I'd neglected while I was focused on being a good daughter to Iris. I'd also started dating. There was a man named Robert who worked in the accounting department at my company. He was kind and thoughtful and had never betrayed me. We had coffee a few times, then dinner. Then we started seeing each other regularly. He didn't know the full story of what had happened with Iris. I'd told him the basics, that my daughter had stolen from me, that we were no longer in contact, that it was a difficult situation. He'd accepted this without judgment and had moved on. It was refreshing to be around someone who didn't need me to explain or justify my decisions. Someone who didn't think I was being cruel for protecting myself. Someone who simply accepted that I was a woman who'd been hurt and was doing her best to move forward. 1 year after the surgery, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Iris. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know you told me not to contact you, but I need to say something." I didn't hang up. I was curious. I was also guarded. I had no idea what she wanted. "I've been in therapy," Iris continued, "for the past 6 months. My therapist has been helping me understand what I did and why I did it. And I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Not sorry that I'm dealing with consequences. But sorry for what I did to you." I listened. I didn't respond. "I know you probably don't believe me. I know you've probably moved on and decided that I'm not worth your time or energy. And I understand that. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand that I betrayed you. I understand that I violated your trust. I understand that what I did was wrong, and I can't undo it, and I have to live with that." "Why are you calling?" I asked. "Because I'm doing the work to become a better person. And part of that work is taking responsibility for what I've done. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to have a relationship with me. I'm just asking you to know that I understand now, and I'm sorry." I was quiet for a long time. I could feel something shifting in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe a small opening, a small acknowledgement that people could change, that people could do terrible things, and then do the work to understand why and become better. "Thank you for telling me that," I said finally. "I appreciate it. Do you think maybe someday we could talk? Not now. I understand if not now, but maybe someday?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm not there yet, but maybe someday." "I'll think about it." After I hung up, I sat with my feelings for a while. I thought about Iris as a child. I thought about the years I'd spent being her mother, believing in her, supporting her. I thought about the betrayal. I thought about the year of legal battles and emotional pain. I thought about the fact that she was apparently doing the work to understand what she'd done. I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive her. I didn't know if our relationship could ever be repaired. But I knew that I was no longer angry. The anger had transformed into something else over the past year. Something quieter. Something that left room for the possibility of healing, even if that healing didn't involve reconciliation. I called Dr. Okonkwo and told her about the phone call. We talked about what it meant. We talked about boundaries and forgiveness and the difference between the two. We talked about the fact that I could forgive Iris without allowing her back into my life. That I could wish her well without trusting her. that I could acknowledge her growth without erasing what she'd done. Healing isn't about forgetting, Dr. Okonkwo said. It's about integrating the experience into your life in a way that doesn't control you anymore. I thought about that. I thought about the fact that I was no longer defined by what Iris had done to me. I was defined by how I'd responded to it. I was defined by the boundaries I'd set. I was defined by the choices I'd made to protect myself and move forward. 2 years after the surgery, I was in a completely different place. Robert and I had gotten engaged. We were planning a wedding for the following spring. I'd been promoted at work. I'd paid off the credit card debt I'd accumulated during the legal battles. I'd rebuilt my savings account to a respectable level. I'd also made a decision about Iris. I called her on a Saturday afternoon. She answered on the second ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her. "About wanting to talk. About doing the work to understand what you did. I know it's been a long time. I understand if you've moved on and don't want to—" "I'd like to have coffee with you," I interrupted. "Just coffee. I'm not promising anything beyond that. But I'd like to talk to you in person." There was a pause. Then, "Really?" "Really, but I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean I've forgiven you. This doesn't mean I trust you again. This doesn't mean our relationship will go back to the way it was. This is just coffee and a conversation." "I understand," Iris said. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." We met at a coffee shop near my house on a Thursday afternoon. Iris looked different, older, thinner. She had the same dark circles under her eyes that she'd had at the trial, but they seemed less pronounced now. She looked like someone who'd been through something difficult and was still in the process of recovering. We sat across from each other at a small table by the window. We ordered coffee. We didn't speak for several minutes. "I don't expect you to understand why I did it," Iris said finally. "I'm not even sure I understand it completely. But I know that I was scared and desperate, and I made a terrible choice. And I've spent the past 2 years understanding the impact of that choice." "Why did you really do it?" I asked. Iris looked down at her coffee. "Because I felt like I was failing. I felt like I was a failure. And instead of dealing with that feeling, I decided to fix it by taking money that wasn't mine. I thought if I could just make this one investment work out, everything would be okay. I'd be okay. We'd be okay." "But it didn't work out." "No, it didn't, and I made everything worse." I listened to her talk about the investment scheme, about the people who'd approached her with promises of returns, about the desperation that had driven her to take money from me, about the realization, months later, when the scheme had collapsed, that she'd destroyed her relationship with her mother for nothing. "I've been in therapy," Iris continued, "and I've been working. I've been trying to build a life that doesn't depend on quick fixes or easy answers. I've been trying to become someone I can respect." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "I'm not asking you to trust me again," Iris said. "I know that's going to take time, if it happens at all. I'm just asking you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to understand what I did and why I did it and how to make sure I never do it again." We talked for 2 hours. We didn't solve anything. We didn't repair our relationship. But we did something else. We acknowledged what had happened. We acknowledged the pain it had caused. We acknowledged that we were both trying to move forward. When I left the coffee shop, I didn't feel healed. But I did feel lighter. I did feel like I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for 2 years. Over the next several months, Iris and I had coffee occasionally. We didn't become close again. We didn't return to the Sunday dinners or the easy intimacy we'd once had. But we did develop a new kind of relationship, one based on honesty rather than assumption, one based on boundaries rather than obligation, one based on the understanding that we were both doing our best to be decent people. When Robert and I got married the following spring, I invited Iris. She came. She sat in the back of the church. She didn't try to sit in the front row or claim a special place in my life. She was just there, witnessing my happiness, respecting the boundaries I'd set. After the ceremony, she approached me in the receiving line. "You look beautiful," she said. "Thank you," I replied. "I'm glad you came." And I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven her completely, not because I trusted her the way I once had, but because I'd learned to live with what had happened. I'd learned to integrate the betrayal into my life without letting it define me. I'd learned to move forward. 3 years after the surgery, I was sitting in my office at work when I received an email from a lawyer. The email informed me that Iris had been setting aside money from her paychecks for the past 3 years. She'd managed to save $12,000. She wanted to know if I would accept this as a partial repayment of what she owed me. I read the email 3 times. $12,000. It was a fraction of what she owed me. It was also a gesture. It was evidence that she was serious about taking responsibility for what she'd done. I called her. "I got the email from your lawyer," I said. "I know it's not much," Iris said quickly. "I know it's nowhere near the full amount, but I wanted to do something. I wanted to show you that I'm serious about making this right, even if it takes me the rest of my life." "Keep the money," I said. "What?" "Keep it. Use it to build a life for yourself. Use it to invest in something that makes you happy. Use it to show yourself that you're capable of building something good." "But I owe you." "You owed me money. That's been established. That's been adjudicated. But what I need more than money is to know that you're okay, that you're building a good life, that you're not defined by the worst thing you ever did." Iris was quiet on the other end of the line. "Thank you, Mom," she said finally. "I don't deserve this, but thank you." After I hung up, I sat at my desk and thought about the journey I'd been on, the surgery that had started everything, the betrayal that had shattered my trust, the legal battle that had consumed a year of my life, the slow, painful process of learning to live with what had happened. And now this, the moment where I could choose to hold on to the hurt or choose to let it go, the moment where I could continue to punish my daughter or choose to believe that she was capable of change. I chose to believe in change, not naively, not without boundaries, but with the understanding that people are capable of growth, that people can do terrible things and then do the work to become better. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean releasing the grip that hurt has on your life. Today, 5 years after the surgery, I'm in a place I never thought I'd be. I'm remarried to a kind man who respects my boundaries. I'm financially secure, having rebuilt most of what I lost. I'm in contact with my daughter, though our relationship is different from what it once was. We have coffee occasionally. We talk on the phone. We've learned to be honest with each other in a way we never were before. The betrayal changed me. It taught me about the importance of boundaries. It taught me that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. It taught me that healing is possible, even when you don't think it is. I don't know if Iris and I will ever have the kind of close relationship we once had. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust her the way I did before. But I do know that I've moved forward. I do know that I've built a good life. I do know that I'm not defined by what she did to me. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. Not that I should have protected myself better, though that's true. Not that I should have set boundaries earlier, though that's also true. But that I'm capable of surviving betrayal. I'm capable of moving forward. I'm capable of building a life that's full of joy and meaning, even after experiencing profound hurt. If you're facing a similar situation, if someone you love has betrayed you, if you're struggling with whether to pursue legal action, if you're trying to figure out how to move forward, I want you to know that it's possible. It's hard. It's painful. It takes time. But it's possible to survive betrayal and build something good on the other side of it. Set your boundaries, protect yourself, and then do the work to heal. You're stronger than you think you are.